Hey, good morning, everyone. Glad to see so many people joining us this morning as we jump into part two of our Future of Email series. My name is Corey Lagrange, and we want to welcome our return visitors who were with us for part one and our new faces here for part two. Today, we'll be talking about how testing can prevent email disasters. So, last time we talked about the history of email and how it brought us to this point where we find ourselves now. And today, we're going to talk about how we can be better and move better into the future and just create better quality emails. So, just like last time, this webinar is for you. If you have any questions, we want to hear them from you. Pop them in the chat. We will be going through them as we go with the presentation. And everybody who does ask a question will be entered to win one of these awesome marketing themed t-shirts from us at Influence and our friends at Email on Acid. So following this webinar, we'll put all of the question askers in a list, randomize it, and give away some t-shirts on our Facebook page. But without further ado, I want to introduce our esteemed guests that we have with us today. We have Dave Cassiopo, President and CEO of Influence, aka my boss. How's it going, Dave?
Good, good.
And Jeff Traub, Customer Success Manager for Email on Acid. I'm going to toss it to Dave to tell you guys a little bit about himself this morning.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Super happy to be here. My name is Dave Cassiopo. I'm the President and CEO of Influence. I have been doing email for probably close to 20 years now, and live and breathe this stuff every day and have a lot of fun with it. I'm excited to be able to present some information to you that I helps you prevent some disasters in your campaigns.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Jeff, to you.
Hey, everybody. Hope everyone's staying warm. My name is Jeff Traub. I am the Manager of Customer Success here at Email on Acid. We are an email testing platform, and my role is to work with our partners to help them achieve email perfection every single time. Our goal at Email on Acid is to reduce that send anxiety that we all know and dread. So happy to be here.
Email perfection every time. You know we nail it every single time, right? Never not nailing it. We all know that that's not true, right? Being in digital marketing and specifically email, as long as all of us have, we probably have what, like 75 combined years of email marketing experience on this call. We've probably seen some awesome hits and some misses in our times. Why don't you guys tell me about some misses that stand out? And if you guys have any that you want to share, you can keep them anonymous. Jump in the chat. We'd love to hear your experiences. But Dave, tell us about a memorable one.
Yeah, so before I jump in, I want to say that, it's the really important thing about going through these campaigns is that you have some sort of a process that you go through without fail every time you get ready to deploy a campaign, whether it's a bulk deployment or an automated campaign, because a lot can go wrong. The reality is that all of us do this a lot, and most of the time we get it right. And sometimes it goes wrong, but you should have a process. And one of the reasons we're partnered with Email on Acid is because they have a fantastic tool set that we've integrated partially into ours. So there's a subset of the Email on Acid tools in ours, but they have a fantastic tool set to help prevent disasters. So, so as I think back to some of the ones I've seen, one that stings the most or stung the most at the time happened a little over 10 years ago. We were working with a casino partner through an agency partner, and we're deploying a campaign with some very special offers, and those offers were targeting customers based on their loyalty points that they had acquired, and somehow the data got crossed over. So the whales, or the really heavy gamblers, were not getting the very, very special offers they should, and some very light gamblers were staring some great opportunities to get some penthouse suites at a very, very good deal. So the casino called us after the campaign went out and called the agency, and were just more than slightly upset at what had happened. And we, as a technology provider, were freaking out a little bit, going back through our code base, trying to figure out how could this possibly get crossed over. It just we couldn't fathom how this could happen. And so we kept digging and digging and digging, stressing the whole time. Finally, we determined that the list that was uploaded to our system had some data that was crossed over. And so someone had taken the Excel file and had tried to do a sort, but had only sorted by a single column, and that being the points column. So I think whoever had the last name A got the most points, and whoever had the last name Z probably got the least points. But it was a disaster regardless. We were able to do an early version of an oops email and get things straightened out and ended up on good terms with everybody, but scary and stressful.
So you don't get the penthouse suite for playing penny slots?
That is accurate. You'd have to play an awful lot of penny slots, I believe.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Gotcha. Noted for future reference.
Take a note.
Jeff, how about you? Let's hear one.
That's a shame. I would have been considered a whale in that case then. So just to reiterate a little bit of what Dave touched upon with the process or a lack of process, my story revolves around a large financial company that sent out an email, but prior to sending it out, they wanted to spell check it. So they passed the email around from team to team so that they could eyeball the spelling just to make sure everything looked good. Everyone missed the fact that they forgot to add a C and an L to the word class. So they sent this out to a very large list with a profanity in it. Not good. So this really highlights the need for a defined process that you use every single time. And if you can automate it, all the better. But boy, yeah, that's a big oops there.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Might even run to some legal ramifications, right?
Yeah, all kinds of things could happen in that case. That's what we want to avoid. Yeah.
So, there are, like we mentioned, a lot of times we get it right, but there are a lot of different things that can go wrong. But a lot of times what we see is, some of these errors, they fall into some major buckets of issues, right? So let's talk through a few of those just to give the viewers out there an idea of some things to watch for and some things that possibly can go wrong. This is a beautiful email. Dave, tell us about this beautiful email we're looking at here.
Yeah, well, behind the mess that you see on the screen, there might actually be a beautiful email, but there's a couple of significant issues here. And this one kind of boils down to whether or not someone took the time to look at some client renderings and figure out how this was actually going to show up on screen. So of the two significant images or issues here, one is it's all images, it's lots of images, and there is no alt text. So for a significant number of email client applications out there, this is what it's going to look like. And it's not much, and it's not very compelling. And there's really nothing that's going to make me want to open this email. So, perhaps somebody pre-flighted this or looked at it on an Apple device and saw their images and thought it was going to work great. But in fact, it's got some real problems there, and it just looks like a whole bunch of broken is what it looks like. So, if you aren't checking for renderings across a broad range of email clients, you really are flying blind. And it's not a difficult task to do, and you should take the time to do it. The second issue we see here is that it's sent on behalf of. So it really shows kind of a low level of maturity when it comes to email marketing. Sending on behalf of is not doing your brand any good. It's not doing you any good in terms of deliverability. So to get into the inbox and to get into the inbox consistently, you should be sending from a domain that you own that is on brand. It doesn't have to be your main domain, but it should be something that's on brand for you. And it should be something that's properly authenticated so that you have the best chances of getting into the inbox. And so when I look at this email, what I suspect is going on here is that behind it, there's a very savvy marketer who has a limited understanding of the complexity of email marketing. So they've got themselves into some challenges here.
Yep. And sometimes we would be so lucky to be fortunate enough to deliver a broken email and have it make its way to the inbox, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, looking at this next example, and this is an example we concocted as an illustration here, but this is a great way to find the spam filter fast. So content filtering or filtering based on the words and the text within your campaigns is not nearly as impactful as it once was, but it's still a thing. There's still an issue there. So, running around with all caps and shouting and using exclamation points is most likely not on brand for you. I'm guessing that's true for just about everybody on this call. So you're not really doing yourself a service by doing those kind of tactics in a subject line to get attention. So Beyond content filtering, though, we also have to worry about reputation filtering, and so that is, what kinds of things are we doing to act like a responsible brand that are going to get us consistently into the inbox, and also getting people to open and click on our emails. So really, to stay ahead of the content filtering piece, again, a pre-flight is a great way to do it. You can check common spam filters and see if you are going to get stuck in those or not, and it's really going to give you a good indication of success or failure at an early level in your campaign.
Awesome. And, sometimes it's not just the technology that you have to worry about upsetting. Sometimes the messaging and the content itself can be a miss.
Yeah, and so in this case, I'm not sure if you almost missed it is an intentional misspelling or not. Either way, it's got my attention. It's got me improperly focused on what's really happening here. And so typos are a killer for credibility and for your brand. They stand out really big time. And in Jeff's example, where they missed a couple of key letters, they really, really stand out and can be troublesome. So just running, obviously you want to manually spell check, but having a system spell check is a definite win and a must have in your pre-flight process.
Yep. And the fact that you have to question whether this was intentional or not is enough of a miss that, even if the person at Wayfair was like, no, we meant to do that. It wasn't obvious enough, for someone who is, I don't know about you guys, I'm very familiar with the Wayfair brand, but I don't know if that brand voice is playful in this way or not. So, experimenting like that is great, but it should be clear. That message can be missed really easily.
Agreed. Yeah.
And sometimes we're a little over eager.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Here's a look at maybe a bit of automation gone wrong. I'm not exactly sure what happened here, but it's definitely a cadence problem. So, this poor subscriber was apparently up late at night shopping at West Elm when automation struck with a vengeance. So they get the first campaign at 1:18, then they get a message at 7:43 in the morning, then they get one at 9:25 in the morning, and then again at 2:22. And that just seems just a bit aggressive to me. There might be some rationale for setting your automation up and testing it, but not just testing it once. Test it on an ongoing basis, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in our presentation here.
Yeah, I'm exhausted for that person.
Yeah.
And sometimes rather than getting 5 emails in the span of 12 hours, sometimes they wait 2 years to reach out.
Right. We sort of have the opposite problem here. This is someone over at Fair Trade, I think, is probably kicking themselves a little bit over this one. So opt-ins from as far back as 2018 are just getting added to their database. That is pretty painful. And I think that, the big lesson here is to make sure that your data connections are working. So data was supposed to get from one system to another. Maybe it did during the testing, but at some point 2 years ago, apparently it stopped and we missed a whole bunch of data. So you have to really be sure that you have if you don't have a way to automatically monitor for this, then you need to put a schedule in place where you go in and you check it every X, whether that's once a month or once a quarter or once a week. It's going to depend on how important it is to you. But one of the things we really like to encourage people to do that can track all the way to a conversion is do a revenue per subscriber per campaign calculation. And it's basically the number of emails deployed by total revenue. And that's going to give you a benchmark to use from one campaign to another, but it's also really going to do a great job of helping you justify the expense for acquisition for email. So as you add up that revenue per subscriber across all your campaigns for a year, you have a really good sense of how much budget you can afford to spend to get new subscribers. And it's a really big deal.
Yep. And, I've run quite a few of these. You see that this is a giveaway campaign that they ran. So likely they were running something that was subscribe to our newsletter to learn more about X, Y, and Z and be entered to win such and such. And it's unfortunate because usually the number of new subscribers is the payoff for one of those campaigns, right? So I'm sure a lot of time and attention went into the execution of this, but then all of those efforts were for naught because the people who actually signed up never got the messages. That's that hurts my marketing heart
Yes,
to
it
see
does.
something like that.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one.
So that hurts my marketing heart. This hurts my marketing eyes.
Yes, it does. Man, this is a tough one here. So dark mode, right? It's just what we all needed, as if we weren't, having enough of a challenge getting to the point where we could all code for responsive design. Now we have to take into account that some subset of our audience is using dark mode, and that appears to be growing at some pace. And so now we have to be aware of that and code for that. And so this absolutely kills this campaign. It is unreadable in this format, and it's highly unlikely that somebody is going to take the time to switch out of dark mode in order to see this. So, it's really a tough fail, but something that could have been caught if you pre-flighted this and checked it on those kinds of devices. And it's not a tough fix in this case. It's a contrast issue, a color issue, definitely a fixable issue.
So nobody's going to select all and highlight it so they can read it.
I think it's pretty unlikely. You might get a couple of desperate
I
folks that really want your message.
Well, guys, we talked about a lot of different categories of ways that we can miss the mark when it comes to our email marketing programs, but really it all comes down to proper planning and strategy, right? We saw a lot of examples of well-intentioned campaigns and sends, and a lot of times what really goes wrong is, like you guys said, a lack of process in pre-testing. And maybe, I know a lot of marketers who really their strategy is on a send by send basis. And, today that can really bite you if you're not thinking beyond just your initial send that you're working on. So making sure that you have a strong foundation and a strong overarching strategy, and more than just a monthly or quarterly strategy, can really save you a lot of headache. But there's some things to consider when it comes to pulling together a good, strong, solid, comprehensive strategy. There's some areas where you can go wrong there too. So let's take a look at some of these.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this first one, failure to understand your audience. This is really about segmentation. So are you paying enough attention to your data to really do smart segmentation? I think about the kinds of messages I get from brand marketers, and Dick's Sporting Goods stands out as a pretty good example to me. They do a nice job of identifying purchases and then following up with post-purchase suggestions that are on target. So they know my interests are golf and basketball, and I get those kinds of suggestive sells versus just a blanket suggestive sell that's going to go to a broad audience is not nearly as intelligent a way to deploy campaigns, especially if you have large segments that you can work with. And the next piece here is really setting the wrong expectations. And this is really about talking to the C-suite. We're the email teams, and we're responsible for often a really high ROI, and the numbers are fantastic for email. I mean, over the years, I've seen $29 and $32 and as high as $40 for every dollar spent is your ROI. And that is amazing. But not all campaigns have that goal or can have that goal. So, content and newsletter campaigns are really important to your brand, but it is absolutely unfair to judge them on an ROI. So that message needs to be delivered clearly to the C-suite and needs to be understood by teams that are deploying campaigns. And then the third item here is messages that serve the brand and not the recipient. And the best example here is if you think about times you've gone to a trade show, and when you returned, you generally get flooded with messaging, and it's very brand centered. It's all about the brand that was there and what they have to offer, and buy. And I think that we all can be a little bit better than that. And if you think about how would you approach that, a better way to communicate would be to establish a post-show rapport. So we enjoyed meeting you at the show. Here are some of our favorite things about the show. We'll be attending these other shows in the future. Can we see you there? Expect to see you there. And then at some point you want to also say, do you have any actual interest in our product, or are we just in it to win the raffle prize? And if so, we'll shortcut, and nobody has to try and pitch something to somebody that's never going to be a buyer. And so I think that's a much more subscriber or recipient focused approach to something like that.
But Dave, Alec Baldwin taught me to always be closing.
Yes, Alec Baldwin may possibly have been teaching you the wrong thing. I think you might have taken the wrong message away from that movie. Give it a rewatch, see if it
Alec
holds up
Baldwin
over
led me
time.
astray.
It's highly possible there. So the next piece we see here is sending with the wrong frequency or cadence, and we saw that in the West Elm example. But frequency is far more often a problem that we see than cadence. If you're thinking about cadence, you're probably already doing a good job because you're trying to determine how much space you need to in between an automated series of campaigns. But over mailing is the real issue here, and there's a couple of philosophies out there in terms of active subscribers and inactive subscribers. And if I get a message from you every day, I'll go blind to it and until the day that I'm getting ready to go shopping, and then I'm going to look for your message and use it. And so there's some rationale for going ahead and emailing every day, but you're also doing yourself some disfavors in terms of your reputation as a sender. So all of the inbox providers, the Gmails and Yahoos of the world, are watching for positive engagement metrics of the recipients of your email campaigns. Did they open and did they click? What activities did they take? Or are they marking it as junk and taking negative reputation hits to your brand? And so if you email everybody every single time, your ratio of positive activity to negative activity is significantly lower. However, if you were to say, I'm going to take those people who engage most often and email them more frequently, you'll probably do yourself a favor in the other direction. Now, some folks will say, chop your list off after every 12 months, just get rid of them. But there's also a strong argument for maybe just mail them less and find your compromise somewhere in between. So you got to make that decision as a brand. Sometimes it's pretty painful if you're chopping off thousands of people from your list that you are hopeful one day will become buyers. But there's just a strategic decision that needs to be made there. So.
And Dave,
And the
we have a
last piece
question
is,
really quick in the chat on the technical side, talking about reputation when it comes to domain reputation. So someone in the chat has said their domain and IP reputation for Gmail has reached its peak bad and has been that way for about 6 months. What do you do to fix that? Is there a way that you can use segmentation to kind of help build back that reputation, or any other functional things that you should focus on?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question, and whoever wrote that is not alone in this trap that they're in right now. So there's no quick way out. It's building back your reputation. Your reputation is constantly being monitored. So, as I referenced a little bit earlier, one tactic you may take is to segment just your Gmail subscribers and then find the most actively engaged of those subscribers and continue to mail them for a while your reputation builds back up. And that's where I'd start, and I'd monitor your progress from there.
Awesome. And when you say engagement, do metrics like opens count towards engagement? Is it a combination of that and others?
Yep, opens and clicks is what you're primarily going to track and look for.
Gotcha.
So watch for those people, go back historically, scan your database and say, who has opened in the last 6 months? Who are the most frequent openers? See if you can get a reasonable sized list. You need some volume to get this corrected. So get the highest volume you can with activity and give that a run.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
You bet. Yeah, so the last piece here is strangers in the audience, and this is really about purchasing lists, and it can really lead to disaster. So there's no quicker way to damage your reputation than to purchase a list of complete strangers. And this is spam. You are in fact a spammer. You have sent unsolicited email to people, and people don't like it. And they've said that for years and years and years. And there's all kinds of laws out there and regulations now, and there have been for years, but people still continue to send spam. And part of that is that because the law is a little bit lax, especially in the US, in terms of you can do that once. If I tell you to stop, now you have to stop. You're legally bound to stop once I tell you to stop sending me that. But you can still try it. It's still a really, really bad idea in most cases.
Yeah,
there's some outliers, but yeah.
Very few of them, right?
Very few.
So we're talking about ways that you can mess this up. Let's look at some really good examples of people executing well on email strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we think this is a great example from Fitbit. It relies on knowing a couple of pieces of information for their segmentation and for their merge here. So it relies on knowing which device the subscriber has, combined with the monitoring of the actual use. And in this case, our subscriber is getting a little bit of a nudge because they haven't logged any activity recently. So as a nicest way you can say to get off your butt and go do something there. So where this can go wrong is if you don't have a truly actionable data set. So here we have the consumption plus the purchase data to make this work. And you got to get that data from either your CRM or your CDP or your e-com site. It lives somewhere, and you got to verify that you're capturing that data, you're updating that data, and that it's collecting properly and accurately on an ongoing basis. So again, if the data connection breaks, you're going to have some tough results. But this one I would consider as a good win.
And Dave, that's a great point just in general that, a lot of marketers don't recognize is that if you have the ability to pull in data from other sources outside of just your email and marketing automation tech stack, things like your usage database, things like your member status, things like that, that can be so incredibly powerful for segmentation and can help you really find these engaged users and these kind of brand evangelists and do some really smart strategic stuff.
Yeah, it gets really fun when you can get to that level. It's really cool.
Awesome. Let's look at another great example here. Mostly great.
So mostly great is how I refer to this one. This is from Duolingo, and they did almost everything great. So there's a lot of praise going on here for the subscriber. 70 minutes of learning, 120 new words, 307 points earned, and an advancement to a bronze level. So yay, I'm doing good things and you're congratulating me. I love all this. And there's one slight oversight at the very end where they're congratulating the subscriber for 0 crowns earned, with some copy that says, while some people were out hoarding toilet paper, you were busy hoarding crowns. And that is unfortunately the opposite of what happened here. So, and I think that, the lesson learned here is that merging data can be really powerful, but it creates a need for a lot of attention to detail. So, I don't know how many subscribers reached the 0 crown limit, but some portion of the database did, and they have sort of a bad ending experience here. And the trickier you try to get, the more details you have to pay attention to. And so you might want to try and consider some copywriting that is a little bit more forgiving to situations like this. So, what if instead for that crown section, they said, how do you stack up? The average Duolingo learner earned 2 crowns. With that copy, them showing me 0 crowns earned is not as negative. It's still, I did a bad thing, but it doesn't feel like a mistake in that case. But otherwise, we love this kind of a milestone email.
Yep. And that's, for the audience out there, that is what they're called, right, Dave? Milestone emails.
Yeah.
These kind of year-end wrap-ups and things like that.
Yeah, they're really cool. Some better executed than others. And we thought this one was a great one.
Awesome. So, we see that email is not only a very personal format, but it's a very visual format as well, right? It doesn't always have to be bells and whistles, but making sure that you have, strategic planning going into the design, and that includes not only just your photos and your visuals, but your calls to action as well. It's another just vital part of the email strategy mix. And there are a lot of things that can go wrong there that we should consider before we start development.
Yeah, absolutely. And leading off with send gimmicks. And this is just about having proper respect for your audience and not trying to play tricks on them. Fake forwards is one of my pet peeves. They're obvious and it's just a bad, disrespectful tactic, I think, at this point. I suppose it's working for somebody because you keep seeing them come through. But another one that I'm not a big fan of is the oops email that wasn't actually an oops. And so again, this is probably 10 plus years ago when the first oops emails were starting to get a lot of attention online for these drastic errors that would go out to millions of subscribers. And what happened was when they would send a follow-up "we're sorry" message, they would get another lift in sales. And so other brands started learning this, and suddenly you have people creating oops situations that aren't really oops situations, and it just kind of disingenuous. And another pet peeve is maybe a few too many emojis, and they're seeing a lot of emojis in subject lines now, and it's a little bit blinding, I think, at this point. So think the next piece to be aware of is a balance of image to text, and we saw that in our very first example where we saw that spliced up graphic, and we don't know what was behind that graphic, but it was probably a beautiful image. Probably really was a nice piece of photography, and someone took the time to slice it up, but we never saw it, and because there wasn't a balance of image to text, there was nothing to read. So it's important to have that. It's going to drive a higher open rate because people are going to get at least a sense of what your content is about, and might be enough for them to download the images and actually engage with the message. Next one here is paying attention to length and purpose of your copy. So, there is a time and a place for long form copy, and that might be something like delivering your brand's position on diversity and inclusion, for example, where you want people to, engage with the first couple of sentences and keep reading without having to take any activity. Probably also have that on your website, but short form probably more of a better driver for when you do need them to take a conversion path that is, get that first click so you can get them to the website, so that you can ultimately get them to take the action that you really want them to take. So important to kind of think through what your messaging is and whether long or short form is going to work best. The next one is the call to action. And so, we can do a lot better than just click here. And in a minute, we'll see an example of that. And that takes us to sort of the Outlook versus Gmail. And this is not just specifically those two inboxes, but the idea that some inboxes support technology better than others. And so Gmail is pretty good about things like video and AMP and things like that. And Outlook is pretty bad at those things. And so you need to know what portion of your audience is going to see your message on which kind of device. And so a tool like Email and Acid can help you determine that kind of thing. And it can also help you deploy campaigns to rendering engines where you can get a sense for whether things are going to work or whether they are not going to work. And so I encourage you to try and do cool things, but I would encourage you to segment out your database to Gmail subscribers, do cool things for them, and have a nice fallback version for the Outlook crowd and for those other email clients that don't support that kind of technology. So, another area that's kind of a pet peeve of mine that gets overlooked by designers is proper experience in contrast, and also the use of really small fonts. So somebody like me who's wearing readers right now, those kinds of things are a real put off. It becomes difficult to read. It's great design. It looks fantastic, but you're losing a section of your audience, and you have to decide, is it acceptable that I'm flat out losing that audience because they can't read the messaging that's in front of me? So,
and the answer is no.
Yeah, it is for me, but there's a battle to be had in certain environments over that. So,
True.
Messages that don't read the room. So what we're really talking about here is during deploying campaigns at the wrong time. So during some sort of social crisis. So recent attacks on the Capitol are probably a bad time to deploy a special offer. That just shows that your brand is not in tune with what's going on. So it goes beyond those batch deployments where you actually click the button to hit send, but what about your automated campaigns? Do you have automation that is running right now that's going to seem inappropriate for what's going on in the world? And you need to be aware of all that stuff and have some sort of process to pause that automation or turn it off completely until things get to a better state where you can move forward.
Yep. Dave, I don't have a visual of this one, but I did see that during the whole GameStop AMC stock craziness that happened a couple of weeks ago, I believe it was Popeyes that actually ran an email and ad campaign where the promo codes were the stock ticker symbols for AME or AMC and GME. And that was an example of them reading the room well, where, they put a funny little spin on it as opposed to something, tasteless, like a brand posting during an insurrection or a national tragedy or a 9/11 sale, which unfortunately I have seen in the past.
Yeah, I love that example. I had not heard about that one. That's a great example of somebody paying attention to what's going on and leveraging it in their favor. So
yeah. Here's another good example of an awesome brand that I follow doing this really well in email.
Yeah. So this one's from Barkbox, and it really keeps the call to action on brand. So a simple lift, it's chat with a PAC member, right? It's instead of click here now or learn more, chat with a PAC member. It's on brand, and think about your brand And is there a better way to emphasize that brand and still get a strong call to action? I'll bet there is, and I'll bet it's not too tough of a lift to get there.
Yep. I want to talk to Floyd, the squeaker in chief.
That's right.
Dave, this also reminds me, and it's my recommendation, your mileage may vary, but talking about CTAs, this also kind of reminds me of having to strike the balance between cheeky CTAs and shaming CTAs. I don't know if you guys have seen, in the past where, for example, these cookie policies that every website had, or a promo code offer or newsletter sign up, your options whenever that pop-up came were, yes, sign me up, or no, I hate saving money. These kind of shaming options for CTAs. Yeah. Well, how do you feel about those? I know how I feel about it, but I may be in the minority.
It's not really leaving somebody with a positive brand experience there.
Yep.
I suppose there's some versions of that could be slightly humorous, but I think I'd probably lean towards a safer option.
Yeah. This is the spirit of that idea executed successfully.
Yep.
Oh man, look at this beauty.
Yeah, this is not, if you looked at this, you're going, wow, this is not winning design awards. It is not pretty, but it is pretty clever. So this is really, it's a company called Cluster Truck, which is a B2B food delivery service. So they bring a food truck out to your business. And so they're poking fun at the idea that white papers are really the only way for B2B marketers to connect with one another. And so I'll leave it to you to read this copy as we follow up with the deck from this webinar, but it's really well done. They go as far as creating their own acronyms like ATE, acceptable time to eat. And they have a chart here to indicate the convergence of breakfast and lunch and the ability to add bacon to your burrito. So really well done effort standing out here, and not a lot of design work had to go into this one, but I know they had a lot of fun putting this one together.
I learned a lot from this white paper. I now know where the axis of can add bacon and acceptable to eat before 11 a.m. converge.
Yes, it's important stuff.
And I've also been using B2B wrong this whole time. It actually stands for burrito to business.
That's right.
Man, thank you, Cluster Truck.
Yep.
Guys, we've talked about some fun visual examples, some fun messaging examples, but let's talk a little bit about testing before we hit that send button, right? Let's break out our crystal ball and apply it to our emails, and get in front of incidents before they happen.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest with you. My crystal ball says I'm hungry now after seeing that burrito email. So I'll have to determine if it's breakfast or lunch, but I'll go back to that diagram. That'll help. But, when we talk about the cost of not testing an email, most people focus on lost customer revenue. And while that is really important, you have to think of the other things, the other costs as well, such as the credibility and brand reputation, lost time sending follow-up emails to explain your blunder. Maybe even you get in trouble with your boss because you just didn't thoroughly test. And of course, there's always the anxiety of knowing that you did not thoroughly test that email and you are about to send that out to thousands of potential customers. There's the anxiety is real, and we all know that. So I guess what I'm getting at is there's not only the lost revenue cost, which is very real, but there's that behind the scenes stuff and all that effort that goes with what happens when an email that hasn't been thoroughly tested goes out. So when I talk to customers every single day about their email QA process, the good news is most people are testing. Now, of course, I work for an email testing platform where people are using our product, but most people are testing previews at the very least. The bad news is most or many are not testing the behind the scenes aspects of an email. For instance, did you include pre-header text, or is your email accessible, or do all your links work, or do your images, did you check out for image validation? Did you spell check the email? And finally, how's your deliverability? These are all the behind the scenes things that previews don't show. And basically, when I think about it as doing a jigsaw puzzle. And with the pandemic, my wife has been doing jigsaw puzzles nonstop. But it's like when I go in and hide some of her pieces so she can't finish that jigsaw puzzle just because we want to keep things, we want to keep things fresh. But it's like doing a jigsaw puzzle with only half the pieces. You're not going to get the entire picture if you're not testing that other stuff. So let's take a look at a preview real quick. So this preview looks great, right? It's well aligned, the spacing looks good, the images are displaying, but really, what is this email or this preview not telling me? How can I know if my pre-header text is present? Or let's say my subscriber list includes those who may have some level of vision impairment, which I guarantee it does, and they use a screen reader. Has this email been coded with those folks in mind? Has alt text been added to the images? Does this email meet the WCAG standards for contrast ratio? Do I know if my links work? I mean, the list goes on and on. I guess I can eyeball it to see if the spelling is the way it's supposed to be, but we know how that worked out for that example I provided earlier. And finally, do we even know if this beautiful email is going to make it to the inbox, or is spam going to grab it? So these are all things that previews or a preview won't tell you. This is the other half of the jigsaw puzzle that I've been talking about. And these are absolutely vital steps in comprehensive end-to-end email testing. So to be honest, unless you're performing all of these steps, you cannot be confident that your email will reach your entire audience error-free. This is really what we keep going back to process. And I think this is where you need to bake this into your set process, your defined process that you do every single time prior to deployment. So Dave, now that we've done all the testing, we've had the creative, we've coded it, we've tested thoroughly. What happens then when we send this thing out?
Yeah, so you start to get into whether or not you're going to do, you're going to have deliverability issues, and we'll cover more of that later. But first, I want to kind of go through some issues on A/B split testing for your content and the performance of the campaign. Excuse me, beyond just reaching the inbox and getting a properly delivered email. So when you're testing, you're doing an A/B split test, and the most popular one is subject line, and there's a reason for that, but there are lots of other things that you could and should be testing. But when you think about testing, the challenges we see are overcomplicating your tests. So you really need to balance your effort with your potential ROI. So what we will often see is that people spend so much time composing a test and get results that are inconclusive that you have wasted a lot of time and effort. So figure out what is likely to be something that's going to have a significant difference and test there first before you get into the minutia. You can really overdo it when it comes to testing. You should definitely test, but start in moderation and build from there. And so the second thing we see as a problem here is, do you have an adequate list size for testing? And in a lot of cases, the answer is no. So we'll see an example here in just a little bit. And the last piece we kind of want people to be thinking about is testing beyond just the variables that we control as the email team. So we control the subject line, we control the content of the message, we control the links, but what about things beyond that? And so a great test to run would be to say, I'm going to take 10% of my list and I'm going to deploy it as I normally would, just an email. I'm going to take another 10% and I'm going to run display or retargeting ads at them at the same time as I'm deploying the email and compare the results. So we're taking a completely outside impact, and I can we can all probably guess that if you're running additional marketing and advertising at these folks, you're going to see some lift. So how much lift, and is it worth the expense of the display or retargeting that you're doing there? So definitely keep an eye on what other activities like that you could do to give your split tests a chance to really make an impact.
And Dave, we have some questions in the chat about proper list sizes to make testing relevant. Can you talk about, just your gut feeling about sizes of lists and sizes of segments within those to be able to create an adequate test?
Yeah, we really like to see us, the A and B versions be at least 10,000 is a really solid number to do a result set that's going to be meaningful for you. If it's too small, it's going to be, you're not really going to know whether you have an accurate winner or loser in your campaign. So like to see 10,000. You could do less and probably get some results out of it, but that's the target I would shoot for.
Right, because you have to think about, if you have a segment of 10,000 and you're seeing a great open rate of 20%, that's 2,000. then you get a click rate of 10%. That's just 200 people, who have ended up clicking. So figuring out whether that is statistically relevant or not, that big number, that you might think is a really big number, pairs down really quickly.
Absolutely. And here's a good example, a visual example of that. So sadly, we know the folks who ran this test, and it was a small company called Influence. I don't know why we ran this test, but our A version was 384 people and our B version was 384 people. And so, there appears to be a winner if you look at the percentages here. So we've got 4.7% unique click-through rate and a 5.2% click-through rate. In the right scenario, that could mean thousands or hundreds of thousands of subscribers and clicks. In this scenario, it means two clicks make the difference there. We didn't learn anything here. We spent some time putting together a test that for some reason at the time we thought was going to be relevant or important, but we didn't learn anything, and we can't get those hours back. I guess we learned not to do that again, I guess is the right way to put that.
That was the test result.
that was a result of this test. Yeah. So this next piece is really, to say, what can you look at beyond, or beyond just the immediate relevancy of your A/B split test? So you've got your segment, you've got your winning percentages, but is there deeper information to be had there? So, for example, going all the way down to conversion rate, well, your lower click-through rate may have had a higher conversion rate. So look at the best metrics you have. But in this case, we're saying, well, let's pull this segment, and say, of the ones that, in the A group, the winner group, how many of them were cold leads, and did they act differently than our warmer leads? And the answer is probably yes. And did it correlate so that we can still run the same winning version to those people, or do we need to be thinking a little bit deeper there? And the reality is we probably need to be thinking a little bit deeper if we just took a random sampling of our audience here, and it includes that broad cross section of prospects.
All awesome points, Dave. And, it really doesn't stop there, right? Whenever, we're thinking about all of these things, deployment is another, major factor in an overall comprehensive testing and proactive strategy, right?
Absolutely. And here's where, send anxiety really kicks in. This is the hitting of the send button, right? We all hope everything's okay at this point. And, some things that we see going wrong are sending from a no reply address. And the reality is people are going to reply. I mean, you can say no reply all day long, and you could say, please do not reply, but they're going to reply anyway. It's the nature of some people. And so you should probably have some sort of a role account set up, at least, that can be either automatically processed or can be monitored by an individual or group of individuals to see which replies really need some response. It's not a fun job right here, but it is important for your brand and for your relationship with your subscribers. So that's we see that really way too often, these no reply addresses, and it's not a hard fix, not a fun fix, but it should be fixed.
And Dave, I might feel a little strongly about this, but to me, sending from a no reply address, and this is just me, it almost feels like a slap in the face, right? This is email. This is the one-to-one channel. This is why we all love email so much. It's one of the few channels that we have where we can make a direct communication with somebody who wants to hear about us and wants to hear things from us. And if you're sending from a no reply email address, think about what that's implying. You're broadcasting at them in that case. You don't
Absolutely.
care what they have to say. You don't care about their response. You don't care about their, what they can add to this conversation. It's a very selfish position to take. And again, I might feel stronger than others on this, but I just love email so much, and I love it as a channel. And there's so much opportunity for it that I feel like too many people squander it with a no reply email address. You can get some incredible insights by opening that up to a two-way conversation. You'd be amazed some of the awesome insights that you get directly from your contacts if you open up that reply address. Again, I might be way blowing this out of proportion, but it's such an opportunity, and it's such an easy fix.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And you phrased it properly when you say you're talking at them. You're not inviting a conversation. So
yeah.
The next
Sorry,
piece
off
we
my soapbox.
That's all right. That's all right. It was a very valid point there. So the next piece here is, what if you get overwhelming results on your deployment? And that sounds like, wow, wouldn't that be great? But there are real problems that can happen. And one would be that you could potentially take down your servers. And we have seen that happen before, where response rates to campaigns were flooding servers that weren't properly balanced to manage that kind of a load. So you need to be thinking about that in advance. Another sort of horrifying example we have is that a customer sent to about 30,000 subscribers using the from address of the CEO of their company. And they got lots and lots and lots and lots of replies to that CEO. And then there was one reply from that CEO to the email team that was the least fun of all. He was super, let's say, hot about the whole thing. It was a very unhappy call, but something that could have been managed. So that could have come from an alternate email address that was routed to a folder where it was monitored by a team or by some individuals to determine which of those which of those responses really needed to be replied to and which of them didn't. Would have taken a lot of the stress out of the situation there. So the last piece here on deployment is that if you don't have technical monitoring in place, you really don't know what's happening post campaign, and a lot of stuff can really happen. So you can get blocked or deferred by the major inbox providers. So Yahoo may decide to defer your email for 4 hours just because they're unsure if it looks like spam, and you don't have any control over that. It's going to happen, but you do need to know if it is happening so that you can fairly judge the effectiveness of your campaign. So it's also possible that you get blacklisted at some point if you're not monitoring blacklists, and you really don't know. Campaign you ran this month was a complete failure compared to the one last month. What happened? Well, you might be on a blacklist. And if you don't have monitoring, you're not going to know that kind of stuff. You're just going to think, well, it was a bad month. It wasn't a bad month. There's a technical problem.
Yep. And the idea behind all of this is we want to learn as we go along, right? Testing can get us a long way. Listening to our audience can get us a long way, but making sure that we're actually looking at the data that we collect and applying that to the future is just as paramount as setting yourself up for success from the start. It's like that old saying goes, it's only a mistake if you do not learn from it, right?
Absolutely. There's a lot to be learned with every deployment, and we need to make sure that we're monitoring that and using it going forward. And so, some of the things that we want people to be aware of is you got to have clearly defined metrics and know which ones are the best. So what is your measurement, and what is the best measurement that you can have to track? And so if you only have opens and clicks to judge the effectiveness of your campaign, well, that's what you've got, and work with it. But there's better, more meaningful metrics out there for a lot of folks. So is it a conversion metric? That would be ideal, right? If it's not a conversion metric, are there downstream engagement metrics, including web page visits and time on site and things like that, that you can merge with the metrics from your email campaigns to get a real sense of how effective things are? And another piece is, are you documenting your strategy? And so a lot of time and effort goes into what you just launched as a campaign. Is that documented somewhere? So when new team members come along, they can learn from the past. Will you even remember what you did in the past? Because we do a lot of work every day, and so many of us are not just strategists, but tactical executioners as well. It's easy to get lost. Once you've launched that campaign, it won or it didn't win, or it could be better, and you're on to the next campaign and you're on to the next campaign, when you probably have something really valuable that you learned a few months back, and don't forget that you learned it. So that kind of bleeds into the next piece here, which is, no execution of your testing results. You performed a test, you picked a winner, you went with the winner. Don't forget what you learned, right? And continue that forward. So to continue to grow and learn from your test experiences, and you'll just get better and better and better at what you do.
Yeah, and you should also take the time to read into what the passive data that your subscribers are passing along to you might hold for you to learn from, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then we get into analytics, right? This is vital. People put so much energy and effort and time and money into creative and coding and testing, and then they send it, and some people think that's it. but that's not it. This is an ongoing process where then you need to get this analytics data, and that can help inform how you move forward with your next campaign. This isn't an end to end. This is a start, and it just goes on, and you use that data to learn, especially when it comes to so with analytics, we're going to look at, of course, we're going to look at totals to opens. We're going to look at unique and total. We're going to look at click rates. You're also going to look at engagement time. But what's really important, and what I hear from customers all the time, is what devices are our customers or your subscribers opening on? And that is vital because it can inform your decisions moving forward. If your customers or subscribers are not opening on Thunderbird, and your preview, and we're always picking on Thunderbird, poor Thunderbird, and your previews just are not rendering very well in Thunderbird, maybe don't focus your coding and development energy on Thunderbird. Focus on, in this case, Google Mail, Apple Mail 10, and Outlook 16. You know, that's where most of your subscribers are opening your email on, and it's very important and vital information from a testing standpoint. But of course, from a business perspective, it's important as well. And I know Dave can speak to that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then here's the engagement data here.
Yeah, so when you take a look at what, the big business picture, there's more to be learned. So this is a fictitious example of how you might look deeper into the results for more meaning. So this is a campaign that is sorted by sales rep. So this was sent on behalf of those sales reps using their email addresses. And what we learned here is that Bob Influence has a much better rapport with his prospects and customers. But that's not the end of the story here, because it may be that Joe Influence is a better closer or has a better close rate. So what's more important to you? Yeah, you want a good rapport. Closing is a big deal. As long as Bob, or as long as Joe isn't doing damage to the alienating some portion of his audience, then Joe's probably the real winner here. And so we probably want to study what Joe does and teach Bob how to do it a little bit better. So but when you think about all these things and the big picture of this stuff, what I want you to take away, and I think what Jeff wants you to take away here, and Corey as well, is that you need to have a process for how you set up your campaigns, from strategy to production to testing and deployment and deliverability, all the way through to the analysis of your campaigns. And one of the reasons we chose to work with the team at Email on Acid is because of the team. They're a fantastic team, but they also have a fantastic product. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a subset of that product that's merged into our marketing automation platform. They've been fabulous to work with, and we are. I just want to say thanks to that team for co-running this presentation with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thanks, Dave. Really happy to be here, and working with Influence has been amazing. And we keep talking about process. And for some of you out there, I just want to highlight this real quick. Implementing a process sometimes can be the hardest part of the entire thing. But I can tell you right now, the time and effort put into getting that process in place in your organization will pay dividends in the end. So great to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate the insights and the background that you guys have to offer. It's just contributed so much to this conversation. So thank you guys so much. We really do appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And I know, guys, we got a lot of questions in the chat that we didn't get to. We will be following up. We'll be providing the recording for this presentation, and we will also be creating a follow-up blog post where we'll address all the questions that we didn't get to during this time that we had live here. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be sending some well thought out emails following up after this presentation, and we will make sure that all of you guys get that. And finally, be on the lookout. This is part 2 of a 3-part series. The next installment will be take your email from skateboard to hoverboard, get the Back to the Future reference, where we'll be talking about how you can grow your email and automation program in maturity to get from point A to a very mature point B or C. And that will be taking place on March 23rd at 11:30, and we've got more details to come. But until then, that's all we've got today. Jeff, Dave, thank you guys so much for being here today. Awesome insights, awesome actionable nuggets of information. Can't thank you guys enough for it.
Well, thanks, Corey.
Awesome. See you guys soon.
Bye, everybody. Bye.